LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
I'm led to believe there's going to be a new Silent Hill film this October, Derek.
With this director coming back, he's coming.
I want to go see it.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Yes. Can you imagine if on the podcast, everyone he rejected me, he's like, oh, I'll let you know.
I'll see what I'm doing that day.
Welcome back to the Old Switcheroo, where we're normally talking gaming retro with Mike and JMO.
I'm not Mike.
But I'm JMO. In this special Screen Time episode, we're taking a break from our usual quest to research and review every game in the Nintendo Classics library to bring you our hot takes on the 2026 Christoph Gans horror film, Return to Silent Hill. If you like what you hear, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow and give us your thoughts in the comments below. Joining me once again is good friend of the show, Derek McDuff from the Underrated Movie Podcast. Derek, I am so excited to talk to you about a surreal, oppressive, nightmarish world that's fictional. How did it finally feel seeing this movie after so very long?
Yeah, it was one of those things where we're like, is this ever going to happen? Is this just an internet rumor? Does this movie actually exist? It felt good.
Yeah, it did feel. It felt like there was closure.
Yes, exactly.
In a movie all about closure.
Right. It was like when Avatar 2 finally came out, and you're like, James Cameron's been making this thing for 14 years or whatever. Does this exist? Or like the New Mutants. You're like, is this thing ever going to show up? And finally, we got these movies.
Yeah, fine. And I like New Mutants. And I won't get into how I thought about this movie, but it's somewhat similar. So, Derek, you were kind enough to invite me onto your show for the 2024 Halloween episode in which we both gushed over the 2006 Silent Hill film that kicked off this franchise. I was audacious enough to ask you to see the next film in the series with me if it ever gets released. We went last night, Universal Cinema at City Walk. What a beautiful theater, huh?
Right, that theater was so cool. I was geeking out looking at it. They have a lot of, like props and like costumes and stuff like that. There's like a whole almost food court. There's like an upstairs bar that has like exclusive like drinks that you can only get there, like there's like I got the Jurassic waters. So it was the vibes were pretty on point there.
Yeah, and we had a great time next door at Margaritaville. We held off talking about the movie afterwards to save it for the pod, but we did run into this Return to Silent Hill standee outside, and a couple of strangers were nice enough to take our picture, and I had this photo experiment of let's make a face to reflect how we feel about the movie, but don't look at it until we're recording. So Derek is sending me the photo right now, and we're going to look at it together for the first time, because I don't know how Derek feels about this movie. And it is oh man, we almost look like the Sock and Buskin masks, like the happy one and the sad one. Like, oh man, you look like a sad boy, Derek.
See, I was not sure what you were doing. I had a feeling you liked the movie. I didn't hate it. I was trying to do a meh kind of face, just kind of like, yeah, it was whatever kind of face.
Well, let's get into the details of it here. We're going to be talking about Return to Silent Hill, starring Jeremy Irvine and Hannah Emily Anderson, released in theaters worldwide 2026. As described on IMDb.com, when a man receives a mysterious letter from his lost love, he is drawn to Silent Hill, a once familiar town, now consumed by darkness. So let's take a quick look at the poster, since it's sometimes people's first impressions. You have this very color muted, almost grayscale image of James, your protagonist, walking past the iconic Welcome to Silent Hill sign while the movie's title and specs float in the fog above. Derek, how do you feel about this poster, and especially compared to other Silent Hill posters?
Yeah, I like it. It feels like it calls back to that original 2006 Silent Hill poster quite a bit. Like it feels really reminiscent of that. It's understated. It's interesting. It kind of draws you in. I love how washed out it is, but then you have the color of the title Return to Silent Hill in the red. It makes it stand out so much more. So I like this a lot, the poster.
Yeah, and it is kind of like you can tell, like, oh, you didn't really get any big names because your lead actor isn't even, I mean, the name is tiny on there and facing
Yeah.
away. So I think it kind of sets your expectations for what this movie is gonna be. So it was distributed by Cineverse with a budget of $23 million, which is like less than half of the original movie, but 3 million more than Revelation. Now, granted, that was 20 million, back when Revelation came out, so adjusted for inflation.
Right. Yeah, that was a
Um,
2012 movie.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It was directed and written by Christoph Gans. And it was based heavily on the events of the 2001 PS2 horror game of the Silent Hill 2. Gans first mentioned working on a film adaptation in November of 2006, after the modest success of the first entry in the franchise. But according to a 2020 interview with Allociné, Gans pulled out of that project to stay quote unquote true to his principles when it became clear the studios wanted to make a Resident Evil style action blockbuster, and he was
Mhm.
uninterested in that. But Derek, you're a Resident Evil boy. You're not really a Silent Hill boy.
I'm a Resident Evil Game Boy, not a Game Boy, but
That
like
sounds confusing, yeah.
yes. But quite like the Resident Evil games. I quite dislike Paul Wes Anderson's Paul W. S. Anderson. There's too many Anderson
Yeah, I was
directors.
gonna say, Wes
Uh,
Anderson, Resident Evil, I would watch the shit out of that.
Not Paul Thomas Anderson, not Wes Anderson, but Paul W. S. Anderson.
Yes.
I don't like his series of Resident Evil movies, and I do feel like Silent Hill Revelations 3D, which we also covered on the Patreon when I did my whole 3D thing.
Check it
Uh,
out.
yep, is very much in that style of the video game movies of that era of the, you know, uh, Paul W. S. Anderson ones.
Yeah, totally. And so in that same interview, Gans announced that he had finished storyboards for Return to Silent Hill after being inspired by PT, the playable teaser for the infamously canceled Silent Hills, an entry in the horror franchise that would have been directed by Hideo Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, and starring Norman Reedus as the player character. Did you ever check this out?
I did not. I mean, I think you mentioned it to me when we were on one of those two podcasts we were on, but I never got a chance to check it out.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, just the creative team of Hideo Kojima, he makes the Metal Gear Solid games.
Hmm.
Guillermo del Toro, right? You're
Yeah.
intimately familiar with him.
Yes.
And then Norman Reedus starring as the main character. Like this, they were cooking.
Hmm.
And there was creative differences, aka Kojima just wasn't treated very well. That's how it
Yeah.
seems to be. Most
He
people
was
side with
like,
him.
I want 30-minute cutscenes.
I mean, he can have them.
Yeah. Well,
Eric,
apparently not in this one.
I guess not. I guess, but you got Norman Reedus, put him on the
Yeah.
screen for a while. So before we go into the joy pros and joy cons of each section of the movie, what was your overall impression of Return to Silent Hill?
My so it's interesting because we talked about the long road to this movie getting, made and getting released, and it clearly, so Christoph Gans makes the first one. He makes it with Roger Avery, who's the writer. He drops out of the second one, like you mentioned, and then, those were actual studio films, but I think he's never let go of like I want to make another Silent Hill movie, and it just gestated for years and became this passion project. And sometimes when a director has an idea they won't let go of for a while and they're just cooking so long, it can get a little bit muddled, especially when it's like, okay, well, the studios aren't involved in this. It's an independent thing made in Serbia. And it kind of, the best way I can put this is it feels like a sci-fi original movie
Yeah.
in almost every respect, in
Yep.
terms of the effects, in terms of the pacing, in terms of the acting, especially. This movie is very, very much like you're flipping channels in 2012 on Sci-Fi, and this shit just comes up on the screen. That's the vibe it gives me.
Yeah, I also, a few minutes in, it struck me like, oof, this acting is rough. I will put it in somewhat the same boat of the acting of the first two films in the franchise, in that when characters are speaking and they're trying to sound casual, it's so awkward, and every line delivery is just like, that was the take you went with? Really? But then I don't know about you, but once Silent Hill and Rust starts flying, I felt that Jeremy Irvine had some genuine moments of like, oh, he looks terrified and deeply exasperated, and like there's sweat pouring down his face, and he's like choking on water, and just like I don't know. I thought he did a decent job in the horror scenes. Would you not agree?
He was fine, you know. I
Okay.
mean, I kind of disagree. I remember you saying something similar about the like bad line delivery when we talked about the first one. I think,
Hmm.
you know, the first one has some really talented actors, you know, Sean Bean and all of them, and Rahita Michelle and all, you know, just Deborah Sue Unger, Carrie Sue Unger, I can't remember her name at the top of my head, but they're really good. And then even the sequel, which is a really bad movie, has like big actors, you know, like Carrie Ann Moss bad doing camp I think is better than just a bad actress, you know,
Yeah.
so I didn't love it. There was a couple, you know, Hannah Emily Anderson who plays the 18 women in this movie. I think she's okay in some roles, but like overall just yeah, this the acting was a little bit, it was, you know, kind of like, oh yeah, this is an independent film.
Right. I definitely had to adjust my expectations of like, okay, the acting's not going to be good, JMO. Just accept that and try to find the good around that. I also agree. I don't think she was it. I think that she and Jeremy Irvine only had chemistry when they were kissing. I feel like that was
Hmm.
the whole audition was like just a like who looks best in a kiss. And I was like, okay, this is good. And then they started talking to each other again. I was like, ugh, not great. Worst for me was just the egregious use of just CG backgrounds that were just very low quality. I don't want to accuse them of using AI because I think it would have looked better if they had. Um, but it was just there's so many shots of him like walking through a town and you're like they did not film any of this on location. Did you notice that a lot that like everything behind him was always very cutscene looking?
Yeah, and it had a very digital glossy look. And one of the things I brought up in that episode that I really like about the first one is that a lot of that film is shot on film. You know, so it gives us this grainy, you know, very spooky, lived-in feel that it feels very appropriate. They do shoot a lot of the dark stuff on digital, and now, of course, you know, unless you're Chris Nolan, nobody's shooting on film these days. But still, it was like such a notable difference. I think, you know, there's still some films that like Jurassic Park movies are shot on film because they wanted to keep the same aesthetic from the original trilogy. But yeah, you can really tell that this is uh, a lot of, you know, not shot on location, shot digitally, a lot of digital, very digital effects. You know, not a lot of practical stuff. And it felt in contrast with a lot of the look and feel of the movie that made the first one so spooky, scary.
Yeah, you and I have talked about how great the return Welcome to Silent Hill sign is. Great sign, great mood
Hmm.
setting, and they didn't even build one of those. Like even that was a CG, and I was like, "Ah, come on.
Yeah,
Like go to Home Depot, get some paint and so, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Make the effort, guys. Come on." Okay, so let's go over the joy pros and joy cons of each section of the movie. We're going to walk through the Wikipedia plot summary. So
Wait,
full
this movie had a plot?
Yeah, okay. All right, calm there. Calm down there. I'm gonna fight you on this one. Full spoilers from here on out. Some time ago, artist James Sunderland has a chance meeting with Mary Crane as she's leaving her hometown of Silent Hill. When he inadvertently causes her to miss a bus, she decides to go back. James offers her a ride and they spark a romance, eventually moving in together in Silent Hill. In the present day, James has moved away and become an alcoholic following the end of his relationship with Mary, and is in contact with a psychologist who is concerned about his mental well-being. He receives a letter from Mary beckoning him back to Silent Hill, and he hastily returns. He discovers the town is covered in fog and falling ash and has been almost entirely abandoned due to an unspecified illness that has killed many. He meets a woman named Angela and is later attacked by a monstrous entity. Any takeaways from the start of the movie, Derek?
Yeah, it's the start of the movie is very disorienting.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like that's what it's going for.
Mhm.
The characters, I will say, as they're introduced here, don't feel so much like characters as they do like cardboard cutouts, you know. And I think a big part of the reason of that is that while Christoph Gans returned, you know, from that original film, Roger Avery did not, you know. I think that Avery is what made those characters in the 2006 Hill films so memorable. Like he won a Oscar for his screenplay of Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction has some very very notable characters. So I think that part was missing, and I was thinking a lot of the 28 day or 28 years later films, which also were like, okay, this is a horror franchise from the early 2000s that got a sequel where none of the creative team was involved, and now the creators are coming back to like make a third film years later. The difference, like I said, though, is that both writer and director come back for that film to collaborate once again, whereas here you just have half of the team. And I feel like you do still have the half of it where there's the spooky vibes, there's the disorienting nature. That is all still here, and that all still works for me. But you're missing the things that tie it all together that make the characters so strong.
Yeah, I could see that. A big theme, I think, of our discussion tonight is going to be that Silent Hill 2 is my favorite horror game of all time. I know the story backwards and forwards. I know all of these characters. And so I think for me, it was enabling me to appreciate things a bit more because I kind of saw where they were attempting.
Mm,
And my nostalgia brain and love for that game was kind of giving a little bit of like half credit for the attempt because I knew the idea is really cool. So like for example, the psychologist, an interesting part of this movie is that your protagonist is getting cell phone calls from his therapist. And she is this unnamed character who is always on screen, and it's kind of like she's viewed through almost like a diamond prism. So like the view of her is always very disorienting, and you never really get a clear picture of her. But it's like a callback to one of my favorite Silent Hill games on the Wii called Shattered Memories. Are you familiar?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Really, really cool twist in this game is that it has a narrator and it's a psychologist. And in between levels, it talks to you, the player, and it gives you like Rorschach tests and it gives you
Mm,
like really unsettling questions. And based on how you answer those questions, the Silent Hill world in game will change. So
interesting.
if you answer the questions with a little bit of thirst to you, then the enemies get more sexual. If you answer the questions angrily, enemies become more aggressive. It's a really cool thing where it's like establishing that the protagonists are mentally troubled and that's coloring your perception of this world. And so, we will see that later on in the plot. But the moment I saw this ongoing conversation with the therapist, I was like, oh, that's neat. Like I think Christoph Gahn's like, he's a noted fan of the franchise.
Yeah.
And so I think he totally played that one.
Yeah, and I will say that's another example of like I don't think that those scenes were incredibly well written, but I think they were very well shot. Like for example, like when we first meet that character, as you mentioned, you're kind of like looking at her through like the bottom of her glass table, so it's kind of like viewing her through this prism, and that's whenever she's only speaking to James on the phone there, she's basically just being a foil to him. And the moment when we start to see things from her perspective, when she's not just the voice or like the person on the other end of the phone, when she's actually doing some things, taking some agency, the perspective shifts. We're not seeing her from under the glass table anymore. We're seeing her dead on. So now she's not just like being viewed through this prism through James's point of view. Now we're seeing her clearly.
Yeah, and she'll show up later in the movie, and what I thought was a kind of an interesting kind of mid-movie twist. Any love for the attack of the armless monster, the straitjacket monster? Because that was something from the original movie. That was the very first monster that Rose encountered. And in this one, you see that it's like its acid spit just completely dissolved like a poor homeless man. And but I don't know, but also though I'm like, man, those look real CG.
Yeah, they did look real CG. I mean, I do appreciate that he used dancers, like to portray those characters. I think dancers with like their hands tied behind their backs, and then I think just put a big CG overlay on them or whatever.
Yeah.
But I did think they were unnerving. They were disturbing. There was a lot of disturbing imagery in this, obviously pulled right out of the games. And when we first see them, I was kind of like, whoa, these are creepy, especially when they melt that homeless guy. I was
Yeah.
just like, all right, we're not messing around. I didn't necessarily feel like James was in any danger at any point when those were happening, but I still felt like the imagery was very striking.
Yeah, and it's something I love too is also a fan of the games. You know, a mechanic in the games is that you always find a radio, and radio will turn to static when a monster nears.
Oh, I could tell even without playing the games. I was like, that is some shit 100% from the games. Like, there is
Right.
no way that like, oh, the monsters are near, the radio static is happening. I was like, okay, well, that's the most video game thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's super video game, but also they did a little extra thing with it because there's like this classical music coming out of the radio, and we'll
Hmm.
find out why later in the film. So let's get a little further in here. The town transforms into a twisted nightmare version of itself, and James is forced to flee to Woodside apartment building where he and Mary once lived. Inside, he meets a violent and mentally unstable man named Eddie and a young girl named Laura. James learns that Mary was taken to Brookhaven Hospital and then encounters a ghoulish figure known as Pyramid Head, who frightens Eddie away. After a tense encounter, James wakes up back in the real Silent Hill, where he again encounters Angela and Laura. Laura claims that she knew Mary, and James soon meets a woman named Maria who looks almost exactly like Mary and offers to take him to Brookhaven. Along the way, James recalls several memories of learning that Mary was involved in a cult operating in Silent Hill that was founded by her father. After seeing her being drugged and taking part in an arcane ritual, he and Mary broke up and he left Silent Hill. So this is where they divert wildly from the plot of the games.
Okay.
In Silent Hill 2, there is no overarching Mary was actually involved in demons. It was just purely a reflection of James's personal misery, and she's dying from an unknown illness in the game.
Okay.
And they decide here to tie it to some weird cult ritual. I think this was one of the bigger misses of the movie. How did you take this whole thing?
I didn't mind it, not having that, protective like ideal of the game. I thought it was a way to bring back to like, oh, there's spooky like cult stuff happening here in Silent Hill. That was such a big part of Silent Hill 2006. So I thought that it worked and it made sense that it's a way for us to get the cult and for to get all the stuff that was going on behind the scenes in Silent Hill that we would not have otherwise in like, an hour and 40-minute movie had a chance to do.
Yeah, I guess so. I think my problem with it is that I never fully understood what ritual was taking place because like she's in a basement with all these cultists and they make her drink something and then they drink her blood? Is that what's going on?
I mean, I understood what was happening with that about as much as I understood anything else that was happening with this
Okay.
movie, so not at all.
Got it. But like, I mean, I don't know. I also don't know if this is a movie you should see sober because like there's some lines where it's like leading up to this, there's a flashback of the cult just meeting in Mary's apartment. And James is like, "What are those weirdos doing back here?" And she's like, "I don't know. They just stopped by." And he's like, "20 people just stopped by," you know? And it's
Yeah,
like,
which
and
I
it's,
think was supposed to be funny. Like the whole theater laughed. I
yeah.
thought that was supposed to be, a laugh line, and if it worked either way.
Yeah, and I also kind of popped off when like she has the little throne to her dad, and it's like the same demonology symbol we've seen from the other movies.
Hmm.
Like I don't mind that. I just feel like how exactly the cult was killing her. It says, "Oh, they've been poisoning her for years." We're gonna find that out in the next scene. But I didn't really understand what she was exactly being poisoned with. And also, there's a scene where James is up against one of the barriers that's keeping him from leaving the town. And there's like radiation symbols, like biohazard
Hmm.
symbols. And I'm like, what are they implying here? Because it used to always just be like it was the fires that were started, you
Right.
know, when in the Silent Hill movie universe. But I think this is also supposed to be like a reboot.
Right. Like I think the thing is it's kind of like maybe it's connected to Silent Hill 1 and 2, or maybe it's like it doesn't have to be. And the plot of this movie is so, nebulous that I think it really kind of doesn't matter. What that is one of the things I like about the '06 one is that the I will say that the cult stuff in that feels so much more meaningful and like, it is the themes of it tie into the script. Like whenever the cult stuff is happening, it's because it is so tied into what the movie is trying to tell you. Whereas here it just feels like it's because it's in Silent Hill you need to have some cult stuff.
Yeah, and there's like all these parts of like the witches and all these like older women being like scary. And I was like, that's
Yeah.
so opposite of like the kind of female empowerment, like, focus of the 2006 movie. Well, not empowerment, that's not the right word, but like, kind of uh, casting a lot of female characters that defy stereotypes and
Right,
norms, you
yeah. And
know?
because that one was originally supposed to like not even have any male characters, which is interesting because yeah, this one does feel a lot less progressive in that way.
Yeah.
Even though it was co-written by a woman, Sandra Vo co-wrote this movie along with Christoph Gans and Will Schneider.
Yeah. So this is where the movie starts to get pretty intense. But before we get to that part, though, Mary slash Maria. So did you clock that they were like supposed to be kind of the same? I mean, it's the same actress,
Yeah, as soon as she was like, "Oh, I look just like her," I was like, "Oh yeah, that is the same actress." And then when she said, "My name is Maria," so I'm like, "Okay, so Mary, I get it."
right? But like, I felt like it was a pretty terrible wig, and
It was a bad wig.
I think they made a pretty big mistake in that they like,
Not the worst fake hair that you see in this movie, but
who was the worst?
the his beard, his fake beard that shows up later, is one of the worst things I've
Oh,
ever seen in my life.
I was too along for the ride. I didn't
Oh,
even notice.
it's rough, and I've seen some memes and stuff about it too. Like it is people are roasting it.
It is Spirit Halloween level fake beard.
It's like what
Uh,
I it was a beard that I would have made when I took theatrical makeup in college and got a C.
yeah, I get it. Um, Eddie, a strange character because in the game, you meet all these different people and they are each going through their own turmoil. And Eddie's was he was horrendously bullied for being a large young man, and he takes all of that anger and he lashes out at people violently for it. Angela, so we're going to be discussing some pretty heavy stuff here, but like Angela in the games is a victim of sexual abuse, and that's like the trauma that she's dealing with. And then you have James, right? So like all these different characters are gathering in Silent Hill because trauma draws them here to this place where they're kind of tortured, and in some levels they're looking for something cathartic so they can move past whatever horrible thing has happened. But this movie, they put Eddie in the movie, but he's only there for a single scene and you never see him again. And it kind of felt like, why did you bother writing and casting that character? You didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, so is he gonna come back? And it's like, no. I'm like, well, what was the point of that guy? Like, yeah, it just felt like we got to put this guy in the movie because he's in the game. We gotta have
Right.
put him in here,
But he
you know?
doesn't look like anything like that in the game. But
Mhm.
it is kind of a similar sort of like, oh, I love this because, this is paradise. All the normies are gone.
Mhm.
Like a lot of this movie, that was a missed opportunity. Shortly after arriving at the hospital, Maria discovers an audio tape explaining that Mary was poisoned. The hospital transforms into a nightmarish version of itself, and Maria is horribly wounded by monstrous nurses. Any love for the monster nurse attack in this movie?
You know what? It was more subtle than the last time there was sexy nurse
With the
jungle
porn
gymming.
sounds?
Yeah, like when I think the way you put it was sexy nurse jungle gymming. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was a little more restrained than that. But yeah, I mean it's fine. It's iconic imagery from the games like Pyramid Head or anything else.
Yeah, and I like I said in our previous episodes together, it does make more sense in this story because I don't know if you picked up on it, but like James is supposed to be sexually frustrated
Hmm.
by his wife being so sick and by leaving her, and like the nurses being so sexualized and so aggressive and so faceless is a manifestation of James's sexual frustration. And it's interesting because in this movie, they kind of clamber towards them, and James is at an elevator trying to hold them off, and one slips past him and stabs Maria. I thought pretty brutally.
Yeah.
And I liked that scene because melee combat is a big part of the Silent Hill franchise. So I just love seeing James going in swinging because that's very much a part of the games. So
And they were in a hospital, so it made sense that there were nurses there. I will
yeah.
say, they didn't just kind of show up because they needed nurses. Like they needed to put the spooky nurses somewhere. I'm like, if you're gonna have the spooky nurses somewhere, put them in the hospital.
Put him in
Makes
the
sense to me.
hospital. Exactly. Yeah. It'd be weirder in the school.
Right.
Um, I'm gonna have a bone to pick with the Wikipedia summary. It says James is forced to abandon the injured Maria. Not really. He kind of just
He just kind of f's off. He's just kind of like, here's some gauze. I'll see you later. We just
yeah.
made out, but I don't like you anymore.
But I sort of liked how detached the characters were from common sense or like empathy with each other. It made it feel very surreal and dreamlike and kind of like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Like,
It's almost like an experimental film or like a music video even at times where it doesn't feel like it plays more on dream logic than it does by like traditional movie logic, where you like things make sense. It's like no, like things just are just kind of happening in whatever order, and things are half remembered, and you're like, people are like, well, how long ago were you here with your girlfriend? And he's like, I don't know. Like it's all very vague, and the way things are flashing back and forth between the past and the present, and like reality slash what is not reality, and just it's all kind of jumbled up together in a way where you feel like you're having a dream, or you're describing something you can't quite remember.
Yeah, and it's then after that attack that James finds the giant insect version of Mary, which felt like a weird callback to the second Silent Hill movie. There's a big bug in the second Silent Hill movie that like tears its own head off and is
Mm.
clamoring at them. And I even turned to you and said, "Oh my God, that thing is back from the second movie."
Hmm.
It's very weird. It feels very like you said sci-fi original movie, like
Hmm.
oh, generic big spooky bug.
You're right.
I did find it surprising and interesting though that so are you familiar with the legacy of the Silent Hill 2 trailer back in like 2000s, early
No.
odds? It shocked the gaming world and all gaming journalists because it depicted a scene of Pyramid Head in what appeared to be committing sexual violence against one of the other monsters. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, I have never seen something. This is your
Hmm.
advertising. Like, are you even allowed to put this in a game?" And it got
Hmm.
this whole conversation going about games as art and what is pushing the limits. And so the movie has that version of the scene. In the actual release of the game, it is toned down somewhat, but it still is pretty kind of clear what you're supposed to be
Hmm.
imagining when
Yeah.
James is in the closet looking through. And in this one, Pyramid Head slams the big bug onto the table and he's like punching it into the table, but their positioning is very sexual. And the bug, I'm not trying to be crude, but the bug has like a very feminine like ass in
I was
this
gonna say,
shot.
did they need to make this like creepy monster so caked up? Like, I'm like, why would it felt like a little much.
Right, but I think it was trying to make you uncomfortable, and I think it
Yeah.
kind of succeeded in that regard. So then James suddenly awakes in a hospital where a psychologist explains that Mary died shortly after their breakup and he has become delusional and obsessed with saving her. The hospital transforms back into Brookhaven and James is able to deduce that Maria isn't real, but is actually a doppelganger of Mary. He finds himself in a gallery made up of dozens of paintings of Mary and declares that he doesn't need Maria anymore. Pyramid Head suddenly appears behind Maria and kills her. James briefly sees a version of himself under Pyramid Head's mask. So Pyramid Head has been for you a strictly horror movie villain.
Yes.
And what did you think of the Pyramid Head kill? And what did you think of James being inside the helmet?
It felt very like Luke Skywalker goes on Dagobah to fight Darth Vader, and then he busts open the Darth Vader, and it's him. He was the monster all along. Can you believe it?
Yeah, it's good.
It felt like, oh yeah, like, and then there's the scene a few bits later where he's like painting himself, and he draws like kind of a pyramid head design over him, and it's like, oh, so like you live long enough to be like you either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the pyramid head, you know?
So you didn't you rolled your eyes pretty hard.
I did a little bit. It wasn't like rolled my eyes, but I was like, yeah, that's kind of to be expected. Like, I don't think like it was that interesting or saying anything revolutionary. I was like, yeah, that's kind of old hat.
So the second game very much, I mean, it kind of just directly states it that Pyramid Head is there to punish James because James feels guilty. And the climax of that game is that James deciding, I don't need you anymore. I'm done punishing myself. And it's cool because it's a boss fight against two pyramid heads, and they kill themselves. Once James reaches that conclusion, the fight ends on its own, which is rare for like a horror game,
Right?
right?
Yeah.
And then Silent Hill Homecoming had one of the possible endings, one of the bad endings, where if you don't save certain characters or you kill certain human characters when you could have shown them mercy, the bad ending is demons lowering each side of the pyramid and then closing it around your head. And
Mm.
that is the canonical, idea that you can become a pyramid head. So I didn't hate it just because I was kind of prepared for the stupidity of it. But I'm Derek, look, we had a little date night, okay? You know I'm a cheap date, okay? I'm a cheap date, you know. Give me some Margaritaville, give me a
Yeah,
schlocky
cheeseburger in
horror movie.
paradise.
Cheeseburger in Paradise. So there's a scene earlier where James is looking through a hole in the wall and watching a horrible monster thing, and it's like just his eye and then you also get that shot of just his eye through the chink in Pyramid Head's armor.
Yeah,
And so I
yeah.
was like, there's some kind of I think Christoph Gans is a good filmmaker that didn't necessarily make a good film here, but there's flashes of something.
Right. Like I said, I think when he's working with, and I will say that probably the same thing about Danny Boyle and his collaboration with Alex Garland is that they are impressive directors who can make really visually stunning stuff, but they need a good script. And I don't think he had a good script. Obviously, he didn't have a very big budget. He might not have had access to the level of acting talent that he had in some of the other films. And I think about this movie in a way, I'm like, I wonder how, for me, when Detective Pikachu came out, I was like, oh my God, this is all this incredible stuff, like all this stuff that I've grown up my whole life being like, this is so cool seeing all this stuff. And I wonder if like somebody hadn't had that same nostalgia for the Pokemon franchise, if they would have liked the movie, they've been like, yeah, there was some cool like battles and stuff happening, but whatever. And in the way that like now this is how I'm approaching Silent Hill was like I don't have any like interest in or lore for Silent Hill other than the movies that I've seen, one of which I liked, one of which I didn't. And even the first film, I kind of didn't love it on the first watch. I think like a lot of people, it took me a while to roll around to it. It's a movie that like was very disrespected in its time and now is kind of seen as like maybe like the first good video game movie. But so I just wonder how it hits different between the two of us because you having all this no nostalgia and knowing about the lore and stuff and me just being like this is just a scary movie and that's it.
Yeah, and I realized I skipped over his first encounter with the oh no, I didn't skip over it, never mind. So I forgot there's two versions of Mary. There's the bug Mary, the big
Hmm.
moth Mary that's climbing along
Well,
the
there's like
walls.
8 versions of Mary, but yes.
I thought I skipped over her final form, but we're gonna get to that here.
Yeah.
So, and I did think the Pyramid Head kill was kind of sick in the way that he like is just hoisting Maria up on that sword like she's a kebab, and James is not even looking, and just there's so much blood, and like from our discussion of the first movie, I love a good Pyramid Head kill,
Hmm.
and just because I think that they're like really gruesome in a kind of a fun way. It kind of gets under your skin with how violent it felt, at least for me.
Yeah.
What did you think though of this twist that like in the middle of the movie, James is constantly bouncing back and forth between the hellish version of Silent Hill with all the monsters and then the limbo version of Silent Hill with Silent Hill with the fog. But at this point in the movie, we snap back to like actual reality, and he's not even in Silent Hill. He's like in a regular hospital, and that's how you know this is really taking place in his mind. Did you like that or did you not like that?
I liked that because it still gave you enough reason to doubt, right? It still was like, oh yeah, this is like happening in his mind, but it's like, or is it? Like the whole movie was so like not giving you answers that I'm like I could take it being like what's real, maybe the hospital like the real world isn't
Oh,
real, like maybe none of this is real, like maybe like he's going back and forth between these different levels of Silent Hill like they were kind of doing in the first one where Sean Bean is on like one plane and he can't get to the other plane which his wife and daughter are on, and he's like maybe somehow transitioning between those. It's so like visually kind of just that's all you're getting is the visuals. You're not getting the any definitive answers from the script. You're just getting the vibes. This is very much a vibes movie, I
yeah.
feel like, and that was where it was most successful. Is where I was like, and we'll get to it when I get to the end. But that's how I feel about the end too. Is like I'm like you could take the ending in a number of ways, just like you could take that twist in the middle a number of ways.
Yeah, I like that. I hadn't really thought about that. And it calls back to Silent Hill Revelation, a movie that I know I was a surprising defender of. If you just subscribe to Derek's Patreon, of course you should. So it's well worth the money. But is it was the guy who played the big monster in that one, Malcolm McDowell or something like that? How do you know what I'm
Oh,
talking about?
yeah, Malcolm, is he in that? I can't even remember because I remember Carrie Ann Moss is like the
Yeah,
bad guy in
and he's the
like.
one who's all blind and like in the basement and went mad.
Oh yeah, that was I totally spaced that was Malcolm McDowell. Like he's so good, and that's another like good actor just doing a big bad camp performance.
But so my favorite line of his in that pretty awful movie is he said, "There are many Silent Hills. Are you sure you're in the right one?" And I
Mm,
love that. It's like establishing that this is James's Silent Hill. and we all have a Silent Hill waiting for us if we go down a dark enough path. And that I think is really interesting.
Right.
Yeah,
Which I'll say, which is why I also am like, well, I don't know if I didn't really take this as a reboot, as like this is just another Silent Hill, because it doesn't make sense chronologically with those other two films, but this is his Silent Hill. Like for like, and my whole thing is like, well, when somebody comes to Silent Hill, whatever point in their life, it's going to be different for them. It's going to be like it doesn't make you. I think you can't think of it in terms of like real world chronology that makes sense, because Silent Hill, there are many Silent Hills. It doesn't make sense in a way of just like, oh yeah, this has existed and the fire happened this year. It's like, no, it happened this way for James. It happened differently for Sean Bean. It happened differently for Malcolm McDowell.
100%, 100%. So let's wrap it up here. James awakens outside of the Lakeview Hotel, which he and Mary used to frequent. Inside, he encounters Laura, who explains that she, Maria, and Angela are all figments of James's imagination based on different aspects of Mary's personality. James also sees a vision of Angela being attacked and enveloped by a ferocious monster resembling Mary's father. James makes it to the roof of the Lakeview Hotel, where he has a final flashback. James recalls that he returned to Silent Hill several months prior to find Mary dying of a prolonged illness caused by the cult drugging her. James smothers her to death in a mercy killing to end her suffering, and a moth-like version of Mary appears before James, and he apologizes to her, which causes her to transform back into Mary's human body. James places her corpse in his car and drives off a pier in apparent suicide. He suddenly wakes up in the moment where he and Mary met and relives their first encounter, but this time he chooses not to take her back to Silent Hill, instead driving away. Um, so a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
First of all, what did you think of the twist that all the women we've been seeing are just different parts of his memories of Mary?
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 month, $90 for 6 month, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It was a way to tackle the idea of this guy coming back for, his love, and it's just, is he in love with her, or is he in love with like the ideal of her, the ideal version of her? And you get the different versions of her where you like first meet her and she's like carrying those bags to the river, and then you see her later and it's just like the kind of the sexy goth girl version of her with the bad wig, and then you get like all these and then you get the spooky monster like you get all these different interpretations, and it's like, okay, maybe none of these are really her, maybe these are all just his like his interpretation of his memories of her. And then when he finally remembers like, oh, that he was the one who killed her, Mercy killed her, and like he kind of is able to reckon with her actual spirit. At least that's my interpretation of it.
Yeah, and I think that it is interesting. That's one of the reasons why I think that I'm a defender of this movie, is that again, it doesn't really work. Nothing is particularly like, they didn't really nail anything. But this idea of different aspects of a person you really love, because when you really love someone, they can be the sexiest person in the world. They can drive you incredibly angry. You can want to protect them. And so, all these different women he's encountering, and them all being married to him in different ways. Now fans are upset because Angela and Laura are kind of fan favorite characters, and so they
Mm.
didn't like the sort of erasure of them and saying, "Well, I was Mary the whole time."
And there was a big, and this was an unintentional for sure laugh when they were like, "Do you remember her name? Her full name? It's Mary Angela Elizabeth Josephine." Like they like named all the characters or
And they
whatever.
show like a CG tombstone.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, oof. I really feel like there's an alternate world where Christoph Gans never moved away from this project, and this was a straight to DVD sequel released in like 2009, and people would really like it. And it'd be like those
Mm,
Scorpion King sequels where it's like
right.
these are actually okay for what they're trying to be.
Yeah, and it felt like a straight to DVD sequel released in
Yeah.
2009, you know?
I almost wonder if a theatrical release was a mistake and they should have just went straight to streaming with this.
Right,
Just
because it had such a long, weird road where, we talked about this movie, like, we're like, when is it going to come out? Because it was supposed to come out in 2025. And we were like, okay, well, we have plans to see this. When is it happening? Because it had been shot over 2023 and 2024 in like 50 days. And then I think it sat on the shelf because they made it independently because it was had a really hard time finding a distributor. And I think like we can kind of see why. And yeah, like maybe if it would have gotten sold to like a streamer, but I don't even know if that like what streamer would necessarily want to take this, and even when it dropped, I didn't see any trailers for this or anything. I just I just kind of like was sporadically checking in on it, and then saw like, oh, it's coming out in January, and then like I saw on my AMC app, it was like, boom, like coming soon. I was like, all right, and I like text you like, JMO, let's go. You didn't even know that it was happening. I'm like, let's set a date and let's go see this movie. And it was even in one of like the AMC in Universal, one of the biggest theaters in the country, and it was like on in one tiny little theater.
yeah, I think Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which has been out for months, had a bigger
Yeah,
showing.
yeah.
But so I want to talk about the Angela scene because this is one of the most memorable moments of the game. Her character was the victim of sexual violence from her father, and she has horrible trauma from that. And so, in a room with these very phallic pistons moving in and out of the walls, you have to fight this thing called the Abstract Daddy. And it's a very horrific boss fight because it's like you can tell under a sheet that there are two figures in there, and one
Mhm.
is definitely the victim of the other, but they're moving as one horrific moment embodied in a creature. But this movie just made it way more explicit where you can actually see the sheets and you can see the look of horror of Angela as her father is on top of her. And I'm sorry, like, if you're listening to this and it's really upsetting, but like they just went there. But I feel conflicted because I kind of respect that they did that moment. I was actually just reading a YouTube argument saying the feminists are never gonna let the abstract daddy be in this movie. And I was like, oh, that aged like milk, huh? You freaking idiot. Like they went there, but then also they didn't really respect the power and horror of that moment. It's almost just used to be spooky.
Mhm.
So I don't know. What did you picked up on that, right? The sort of
I
sexual
honestly I
nature.
didn't. I cannot
Oh,
like didn't even like because it just looked like a kind of like vague sheet. And if I
oh.
think if I had known for what it was and I knew what I was looking at, I would probably have picked up on it. But I didn't even get what I was seeing there.
Oh, it
It
was
was just, and it might be because it was just so dark and stuff, and like I didn't really, had no idea what I was seeing. I was just like, oh, it's like a sheet.
okay.
So yeah.
Well,
Now with that context, that makes a lot more sense.
right, and there's like a moment when he's talking to her, and the sheets are grabbing her bare legs, and it's like,
That I did, yeah. That was like okay. That I did get that.
right. But so, I don't know. I just couldn't believe that that was from the game into this movie.
Hmm.
I just don't know if they should have gone for something so awful if
Yeah.
they weren't prepared to make a statement about it or like
Well,
have
now that
that
you're
be.
saying the thing about the grabbing the legs, I'm like remembering. I'm like, oh yeah, there was. It did seem like something was happening in
Yeah.
the sheets. Like it's kind of coming back to me a little bit now. Because it was still kind of obscured,
Yeah.
but you could tell that like there was a woman being restrained, for lack of a better term.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it is also kind of a neat parallel because the other final boss monster of this movie is Mary's form. She's in a hospital bed, and the hospital bed sheets are her moth wings, and she like reaches down and grabs after him. And I really liked this because at the end of the game, the last boss is kind of lame. It's a really easy boss fight, and she's kind of just clattering around in what sort of looks like a hospital bed. But with every other monster being so imaginative, it just feels like a real shrug. And I like this moment because you're flashing back to the moment that James Mercy killed his wife, And this classical music we've been hearing from the radio this whole time was what was on the radio when he killed Mary. And
Mm.
there's all these horrible moths because a moth flew into the room right at the moment she died. And like the sheets, all the sheet monsters are because he smothered her and he feels really guilty about it. What kills me though is that in the game, it's not a mercy killing. He basically, I mean, it kind of is, and it kind of isn't. Like she's ready to die, but there's clearly a moment where she like is fighting him and he doesn't stop.
Mhm.
What did you think about that reveal that he's the one who killed Mary?
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing where too I was like, this guy's clearly got some repressed trauma, like
Yeah.
where he's like not saying like he doesn't remember that she's dead, he doesn't remember how long it's been, and the fact that he was the one who mercy killed her made a lot of sense. That he would like that's why he repressed that memory of her being dead, and that's why he feels so guilty. And then him essentially after that committing suicide because of the guilt that he still feels. Uh, it made a lot of sense, and I think her that kind of quote unquote moth form that she takes also makes sense. Like you mentioned, the moth flies in, but there's a lot of other moth stuff that's in this movie. Like they will often flutter up on the windows. There's of course in one of her, appearances she has when she's got like the midriff, she's got the moth tattoo. In as Angela, I guess is that character. No, that's Maria. When she's Maria. So it felt like it was building up to that. It wasn't just out of nowhere. They had done the legwork to make that imagery pay off at the end.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Silent Hill 2 has a number of endings, and there's a constant debate about what is the canonical ending.
Mm.
And my personal favorite is the one they went with here, which is James talking to the audience slash player, and it ends with his headlights of his car driving into the lake. And it's been confirmed with the director that like the car that you leave from the beginning of the game had Mary's body in it the whole time. And this whole game has been him dealing with what he's just done.
Mm.
But I was very surprised at the twist ending, which is as he drowns in the lake, he wakes up again on the side of the road, and there is a you're aware that they've recently remade Silent Hill 2?
Yeah.
So it does not change much in the story, but one of the biggest changes they make is that they have corpses of James throughout the game, and you are playing as James,
Hmm.
finding your own corpse around Silent Hill. And this one is like its feet are sticking out of a dumpster, and this one's like up against the fence, and you're like, that why are there all these dead bodies of me? And I
Hmm.
guess there's these Polaroid collectibles. You can find 20 different Polaroids, and if you get them all and you look on the back of them, the message says you have been here for 2 decades. And so
Okay.
James is trapped in a loop of constantly reliving this experience over and over and over again. So I didn't even know that was a thing until this happened, and I was like, "Oh, that's another example of you can not like this movie if you want, but there was an attempt to look at the fans of the series and go like, I see you. I know what makes Silent Hill interesting, and I'm gonna try." So A for effort, B for
Yeah.
effort, C for effort.
And I wonder if, this one will come around like the first one did. Because as we talked about, the first one was not well received when it came out. This one is being very, very not well received. I think I looked it up and it's got an even worse letterbox score than Silent Hill 2
Yeah.
by like a point or point oh one point one or whatever. And I'm just like, that's wild to me. Um, but yeah, so I wonder, with if like it's like with the Star Wars prequels now, like those movies were reviled, and now people love them, and now and I'm like now like the generation that grew up with like the Star Wars sequels are starting to like them. So I think everything once you have enough nostalgia for them, they come back around. So I wonder if that will happen with this movie, or if it's just destined to be like forgotten. If
I,
it can stay in the cultural memory, it might.
I think part of the reason why the Star Wars prequels have been so like reassessed is that like the younger generation, they spend so much time watching amateur content creators that they don't really expect a level of like acting, like everything is schlocky to them.
Well, the
So like
prequels, that's our generation that grew up with the prequels. It's not even like the younger generation.
right, but the younger generation I think are the ones who are like these are better. There's a very strong section of the Star Wars fan base that think the three prequels are the best three movies.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people our age who will go to bat about Revenge of the Sith being like a masterpiece, and I'm just like, it's fine. I like it. It's not The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, well, so I think we covered the joy pros and joy cons of this movie. Anything else to say before we render our verdicts?
Yeah, I mean, I will say just a couple like stray thoughts, stray joy pros and joy cons. I the on the end of the movie, I kind of alluded to that I liked the ambiguity of it because, as we said, he drives in the lake and then you get the whole reveal, and it makes you be like, oh, was this whole thing a dream? Did he time travel? Is this his like dying fantasy? And I think it could be any of those, and it doesn't give you a definitive answer. So it's like, yeah, you want to have the happy ending. It's able to, because a movie can't give you multiple endings like a video game can, and this finds a way to kind of do that, where it's like you can be like, hey, this is the happy ending, or you can be like, my interpretation is probably personally that like, no, I think he's just imagining this, and this is his dying thoughts. Um, or you could be like, it was all in his head. Like, you could take it a number of different ways, but I like that it's ambiguous and you don't have a definitive answer. I think I would like it a lot less if it did, like, have a definitive answer. I think it's almost like the top spinning at the end of Inception. My other last Joy Pro is that the composer for this is the actual composer for the Silent Hill games, Akira Yamaoka, and Christoph Gans said he wouldn't even do the film if that composer did not come on and do it. And yeah, this movie sounds like a Silent Hill game, and I will say, that's because they got the person who wrote the Silent Hill music to write the music for this film.
Yeah, and not to embarrass you, but you had to run off to the bathroom, so you missed a lot of really cool credit sequence, like with that game music kicking in, and there was all these
Hmm.
cool visuals. And I was like, oh man, Derek's missing the best part of the movie. It's the credits.
Yeah, that says a lot about the movie. The credits are the
It's
best part of the movie.
Can I revise that? You missed the most polished part of the movie,
Okay, fair, fair,
which was
fair.
the credit sequence.
Yes.
All right, well, so we covered the joy pros and joy cons of Return to Silent Hill. Derek, we only have two on this show. Is it a Nintendo or a Nintendo?
I think it's a Nintendo don't, but just ever so slightly.
Okay.
Like I don't hate this movie as much as a lot of people, but I still would not necessarily recommend this to anyone except for maybe the most hardcore Silent Hill fans. And even then, like I feel like they might be like, well, they changed it, now it sucks.
Yeah, they're mad. The Silent Hill fan base is not happy. The Reddit is a raging.
That
And
checks out.
and it's this awkward thing. It's like Ghostbusters 2016. Actually, that movie was actually way better than this one. That's not a great comparison. That movie, like, but so yeah. You know, for me, I think if you're willing to check your brain at the door, right, and just prepare yourself for some pretty atrocious CG, acting is hit or miss, I think you can appreciate the ways that this movie is attempting a big swing. So for me, it's a Nintendo, and this is motivated almost entirely by nostalgia for the second game, but it's my favorite Silent Hill movie, dude. Like, I'm sorry.
Really?
It
Wow.
is.
The
It
more than the
is.
first one.
More than the first one because
Wow.
I feel like the first one meanders more, and this one had more of a laser focus. Like, we're gonna tell a story about this incredibly traumatized young man, and everything will connect to him. And I feel like the narrative sort of pulls away from the mother-daughter relationship too much in the first one. Again, not I like all three of these movies for different reasons.
Yeah.
But it ties back to what kind of Silent Hill game I like. There's two types. There's the lore heavy one and the psychological one. And I've
Hmm.
always been a fan of the psychological. So
Gotcha.
even as sloppy as it is, this is a Nintendo for me. And I'm excited
Nice.
because that means we get to throw it to our listeners on the Discord. So join the Discord on www.theoldswitcharoo.com if anyone else sees this movie.
If you're one of the four people who watched this movie, please let us know.
All right. So we're going to call that game over for today. This concludes our final verdict. Return to Silent Hill. It's a tie. So we'll see how it all shakes out. We'll see what this movie's legacy ends up being. Derek, thank you so much for talking Silent Hill with me over and over.
Yeah.
Before you get on out of here, why don't you remind our people where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find my podcast, as you mentioned, the Underrated Movie Podcast, however you're listening to this. You can also go to underratedmoviepodcast.com or look up Underrated Movie Podcast on any of the socials. And Underrated and all the other podcast stuff I do will be there.
That sounds excellent. Everyone join us next time. We'll be spreading the happiness with Chibi Robo on the GameCube. Huge vibe shift.
Yeah, I will
From
say.
like what's happening in the world and this movie, then Chibi Robo. So it's like we recorded that way in advance.
Mm.
Until next time, please remember to like, follow, or subscribe to the Old Switch Aroo and rate or review the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit www.theoldswitcharoo.com to find our social media links. We'd love to hear what you thought about this episode or what you'd like to hear in future episodes. As always, thanks for listening to the Old Switcheroo, where we're normally talking gaming retro with Mike and JMO.
I'm still not Mike.
But I've been JMO. Game on, everyone.